Multiple Man is such an amazingly powerful character. He is Jamie Madrox, and his mutant power is that he can create duplicates, nicknamed dupes of himself to an almost unlimited extent. Initially in the comics he tapped out at creating 40 dupes, but now we've seen him create honestly a whole laboratory, staffing, and more than that. His duplicates can go out in the world and live, and when he absorbs them back, ideally before, they die, he absorbs everything they have known and learned, all their memories, their experiences, their skills, and their knowledge. Because of this, Jamie is extremely skilled and is also considered a PhD multiple times over at this point. Dr. Madrox, everyone. Beast is a character that people think of as being someone who's very into books, very well read, got a great vocabulary, and has had almost since the beginning. While that is part of who Hank is, it's also important to remember his actual mutation, which of course has to do with him being super agile and dexterous, while also having oversized hands and feet. That's primarily what we focused on initially with this character. As time went on, Beast ended up getting a secondary mutation, or rather having his mutation accelerate pretty much, to the point that he also grew fur, fangs, and in some instances has also been shown having claws to a certain extent. I think George Bauza has actually summed it up pretty accurately when he says that Beast for the most part is a pacifist. He's a lover, he's not a fighter, but when pushed to the limit, you better watch out. While Beast isn't known to be a very aggressive character normally, when he is in a tight spot, if he has to be, he can actually be one of the most deadly fighters that we have. He's not only very strong physically, but he's also very dexterous, which makes him a hard opponent to deal with. And as we saw more recently during the Krakoan era, when he wants to be, he can be quite brutal and even deadly. Borderline savage. Beast was a member of X Factor back on the original team before they were ever known for being a detective agency. Back in the old school days when it was just like the original roster but brought back. The original roster of the X-Men, that is. If you thought Firefist was just a character that existed in the Deadpool movies, think again. He's actually based off of a Marvel Comics character of the same name. Okay, so the two characters are somewhat different, but Firefist is a mutant who does go by the nickname of Rusty, just like in the movies. In a way, his story does mirror the one that we see in Deadpool 2, but instead of going to a superpowered prison, Rusty was instead arrested by military police after his pyrokinetic powers first manifested. And instead of becoming an ally of Deadpool in the comics, Rusty was rescued by the original X Factor team, who were government sanctioned and were basically just the X-Men in disguise. As Firefist, Rusty has been shown to be a pretty powerful pyrokinetic and can even use his abilities to do things like bend metal with his bare hands, because through touch he can basically heat up the metal to make it malleable, so kinda looks like he has super strength when he does it. Pretty cool. Honestly, I love Boom Boom. She probably isn't one of the most powerful characters that's on our list, to be real with you, but she is a character that I feel is often just underappreciated and undervalued in terms of her abilities, which is why I decided to feature her here, because that's basically what this list is all about. She's come a long way since she was first introduced in terms of her control over her abilities. Boom Boom is able to create time explosives, time bombs. She can control how long those energy-based constructs have until they explode, and she can even now control somewhat the direction at which they ripple outwards in terms of their explosive effects. Not only this, but there's also a certain level of stealth that she can apply to her time bombs, by muffling the sound somewhat, allowing her to operate in a more stealthily manner. Something you would never think of for a character whose powers are tied to, explosive abilities. Boom Boom has worked with X Factor, but has also worked with X-Force as well. Prodigy is likely one of the smartest characters that we have in the Marvel multiverse. Prodigy himself is already an extremely smart person. However, with his mutation, he's able to gain the skills and knowledge of the people around him, which means that there is almost nothing he doesn't know or isn't capable of learning due to being around so many gifted people in his life, so many skilled and smart people. He basically has a type of telepathy which allows him to tap into other people's abilities. It's also really interesting because this seems to happen pretty much subconsciously, like reflexively, so it's not necessarily something that he has to think about doing or control it like most telepaths, it just kind of happens for him. This has meant in the past that during a fight, Prodigy can actually anticipate the moves of his opponent because of his ability, allowing him to subconsciously tap into their mind. So without thinking about it, he can reflexively anticipate and block attacks, which I think is an extremely powerful ability that not a lot of people even talk about when it comes to this character. So yeah, he's a genius with almost unlimited potential in terms of what he can learn and know at any given moment, but he also could be quite useful in a fight considering his defensive capabilities when facing an opponent. Banshee Banshee is another more classic X Factor character. I feel like when it comes to X Factor, a lot of people think more of Banshee's daughter Siren than they usually think of him. This is because Siren is probably more well known due to her being on a more well known run or a series or just a roster of X Factor. But like daughter, like father, Sean Cassidy is also pretty powerful when it comes to what he can do. He also of course has sonic abilities which allow him to produce a sonic scream, allow him to fly, and also give him the abilities to put people in a trance-like state and even make them unconscious. Yeah, you can just knock them out. But the other thing when it comes to Sean is that he has other abilities outside of his mutant powers, and that's I think what makes him also super cool. He's a gifted detective, non-armed combatant, and is also really good with projectile weapons as well, being known to be a very good marksman. So just all around, he has a lot that he brings to the table. He's a strong character that a lot of people just don't often think of. At least, you know, I would say not in the modern day as much. Often seeming to rank lower when it comes to polls for everyone's favorite Summers brother, Havok is still a powerful hero and a super interesting character. Ever the middle child, the amount of struggle and misfortune Alex Summers has seen in his life is honestly pretty unprecedented. He never really wanted to become an X-Men, but ultimately resided to doing so because he found otherwise being in mortal peril every day seemed to have become something inescapable for him, and so that's kind of how he ended up becoming a hero. He didn't want to be one, but he just kind of got roped into it. Havok is also a member of one of my favorite teams, not X Factor, sorry X Factor, you're great too, but I'm talking about Hellions, and we're not talking about Emma Frost Hellions here, we are talking about the eponymous series from 2020. Havok emits plasma bursts which radiate out from him in circular waves from all around his body, also meaning that we get some really sweet artwork whenever people are drawing his powers. He sometimes struggles to control his powers, which is why he can be seen as kind of dangerous or more of a loose cannon at times. His plasma bursts come from cosmic energies that he can draw on, and it's pretty much implied that he's always passively absorbing these energies, so he's always, you know, juiced and ready to use his powers, for the most part. Some may not think of these two half-elf French-Canadian mutants as being powerful because for a time, for their powers to work, they actually had to be together. They had to be right by each other. We're talking about the siblings Northstar and Aurora, though chiefly for this point I'm going to focus on Aurora here. Although now their powers can work without one another, still being together does increase their power levels, and being apart does, you know, lower it a little bit. Both siblings share the power of photokinesis and can use the light that they produce to do various things. Aurora, Jean-Marie, can use the light to shock, blast, and soothe. Initially these two siblings needed to hold hands to boost their powers, but now just being in close proximity gives them an actual boost. Like her brother Northstar, Aurora has also been a member of X Factor during their time as a detective agency. Northstar is another character that people often don't think of. Just because you don't think of him though doesn't mean that he isn't a powerhouse. When it comes to some of the fastest characters in the Marvel multiverse, there are a few people that I tend to think of personally. One of them of course is the character that many people think of, Quicksilver, and another is honestly the Eternal Makari, who does not get talked about enough. Eternals obviously are made by Celestials, so Makari is pretty insanely fast, also kind of basically a superhero version of Hermes. And weirdly, Quicksilver is often thought of as being the fastest character in the Marvel universe, but I would actually argue that there are a lot of people that are faster than Quicksilver, and that list would include Northstar. Northstar can travel almost at the speed of light due to his abilities that he gets through his mutation, which makes him pretty fast to be honest. While he can't get to exactly the speed of light, he can get 99% of the way, it's believed, which is still insanely fast. But like I said, a lot of people don't think of Northstar just because he isn't a character who is as prominently featured as someone like Quicksilver. Rictor over time has become more and more powerful in the comics to the point that he's basically like a masterful druid character. Most people just don't think of Rictor, but he is insanely powerful at this point in history. He's kind of similar to another underappreciated character I love to talk about from the Inhumans, Crystal. Crystal also has elemental powers, and Rictor has powers that basically kind of like connect him to the earth, and they're typically seismic in origins. At least that's where things started out. But it does connect him to a lot of elements as well. He has shown skill over manipulating various different elements of the planet Earth, including the Earth itself, plant life, lava, and seismic energy. He can use his control over seismic energy to basically create earthquakes, or more traditionally emit shock waves out from him, which radiate sort of outwards. Get it? Like Richter scale? Except his last name is actually spelled the same way, but his code name is spelled with an O in place of the E. That's about it. I'm your host Amanda McKnight. Until next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube.